I've unfortunately never really implemented a cash program that I knew of, that I consciously engaged in, except in Lebanon, where I was working in 2006 after the Israeli attacks on southern Lebanon, and where we'd put together a huge shelter program on the basis of really heavy logistics. We thought we would corner the market on cement and corner the market on rebar and get the biggest warehouse in southern Lebanon, until we started discussing with the communities who themselves were very keen on just getting some financial support, because they knew they could do a whole lot more if they had a little bit of money. They could get contractors who'd work much cheaper, they could get the materials cheaper. And what started off as a program with huge logistics and supply chain ended up being a much cleverer program with financial transfers to beneficiaries and communities themselves. That was my first experience.
I remember the first time I was giving out cash to people in Gaza Strip to respond to the isolation from the occupation, and they were really on hard times, and I couldn't believe the transformational impact it had on these families. It kind of felt like, gosh, can we really do this? Can we really just give out cash to people? But we found out that not only we could, that it had an enormous transformative effect on their lives in a way that in-kind assistance just never did.
DRC has actually a relatively long engagement in cash. We started already in the Balkans with some cash-based interventions in the 90s. One of our biggest projects in early 2000 to 2005 was the response to the Chechen War. But back then, in those post-socialist contexts, cash wasn't really anything special. I mean, it wasn't sort of articulated as a revolution. It was only when we were part of the Somali, the drought response consortia, that cash really became articulated as a revolution in the humanitarian sector.
So my experience with cash transfers began in 2005, 2006, when I worked with staff in the Democratic Republic of Congo to pilot it. And I remember distinctly one of my staff members asking, when we were going over, okay, our final preparations, he asked, if a beneficiary runs away with the cash, should we chase him? And I think what's been quite remarkable over the last 10 years is how far we've gone from the issues related to distrust and risk and, piloting to acceptance. And I think, one of the most key elements for cash transfers is the role of evidence, and how some bottom-up pushing by people and by leaders to use cash transfers where it's appropriate and combined with evidence on the circumstances under which it's appropriate has really generated some of the most important changes we've seen in the humanitarian system in the last 10 years.
World Vision has been involved with cash transfers since the tsunami. We've been refining our methods over time. We did some pilots in Lesotho, which allowed us to contribute to the industry from a thought leadership perspective as it relates to gender.
CRS has been doing cash-based programming since about 2000, with seed vouchers and fairs were probably one of the first things that we did at scale. And since then has been really, especially in the past 3 or 4 years, has been putting a real focus on cash-based programming, market-based programming, recognizing that the beneficiary is at the middle, that there are so many benefits to local economies, to empowerment of people to be able to take responsibility and ownership over their own recovery. So it's been a real push within CRS over the past couple of years.
I have been overseeing for the last 5.5 years the Office of Food for Peace at USAID, and that office has shifted from a program approach that was tied directly to in-kind food assistance to one that is using cash-based transfers.
So the British Red Cross, within the movement of the Red Cross, is looking to become a leader in cash-based programming. It has to date been quite successful in implementing cash-based interventions worldwide. But one of the aims of the Red Cross movement is to institutionalize cash throughout most of its partner national societies. We need to be more strong in our advocacy towards promoting cash as a mechanism for delivery of aid, both in response and preparedness.
For gold, working on the CHS, the core humanitarian standards, we're looking at cash as actually being a part of accountability as well as in terms of an economic intervention.
The World Bank and UNICEF have been collaborating over the past 5 years on several cash transfer programs. And one of the key elements that we have been identifying is how we can make these cash transfer programs more effective for the poorest of the people.
So we have been working jointly in several countries, and also one important aspect for us has been to facilitate a community of practice on cash transfer programming to improve the practice of government members working on this issue.
Another very important aspect that we've been developing together is to try to find ways how we can strengthen the impact of cash transfer programs on the human capital of the families and the children that participate into that.
What we've been doing also is working on Cash Plus, so working on accompanying measures to cash transfers, acknowledging that cash is not the only contributor to improve the well-being of the households.
And we hope that this experience can be shared with other agencies that work on cash transfer programs, and so they can be adopted by more governments around the world.